All of us have power. The power to control, and just as easily, the power to be controlled. The power to manipulate and to be manipulated. So what makes that difference? What decides who stays in control and who becomes the controlled, and in many cases, the victim? Not all power is inherently evil, but the saying has always stood, absolute power corrupts absolutely. With power comes not just responsibility, but hunger. The desire to be and stay the one in control. To reach your hand across the earth and hold it within your grasp. We all want power over our own fates, but what about power over others? If we don't control them, is there not the chance that we become the ones controlled? There is one thing that stands between control and being controlled. Knowledge. Knowing what power looks like, how it can be used against you, and how you can use it against others. Knowledge is the greatest power of all. Was that dramatic enough for y'all? On a subathon of mine not too long ago, a chatter had asked me how do we know if someone has power over us and when they're abusing it. I know that's a complicated subject to be talking about on a stream, but it was a subathon. It was like the second day in. It was like 3 in the morning, and things tend to get deep around that time. I tried to explain it in some abstract concepts. If someone has something to offer, or if somebody has something that we desire, if they have an audience, then maybe they hold some sort of power, and there's something that could be exchanged between us. But it wasn't quite clicking, and I couldn't figure out how exactly to get my point across. And so, as a joke, the chatter had decided to send, "Still doesn't make sense. Explain using Dream SMP terms." Now, this was a joke. See, because I've had a hyperfixation on the Dream SMP for like the past 3 years, and admittedly, I've grown most of my community around the fact that we all relate to the Dream SMP, and we all enjoy it very much, and we talk about it and analyze it as often as we can, but something clicked. The thing is, I could do that. I could be the teacher who meets the students where they are. I'm one of the cool kids. I'm cool and hip and with the times. Let's talk about video games. Write me an essay on your favorite Vine. Do a TikTok for your final, you know? And lo and behold, as soon as I started explaining the concept of power dynamics through the Dream SMP, the chatter started to understand what I was trying to say. It worked. That exact night I started the script. The reality is we've all heard of power dynamics through some Twitter or Tumblr or fandom discourse somewhere along the lines on the internet. We all know that there's something that feels wrong about shipping or being in relationships with large age gaps because there's a power dynamic at play, and there's something that feels weird when you see a famous creator interacting personally with a single fan because you know there's some kind of power dynamic there, but what the hell does that mean? And what dynamics are taking place? Why are they so dangerous? And what the hell is power? Part 0, power. When talking about situations like this, power is not defined as somebody's physical ability to do something. Rather, it's somebody's ability to make someone else think, believe, or act in a certain way in accordance with what they desire. Someone who can convince lots of people to believe something or even do something for them is someone who holds a lot of power. Let's talk about Dream. Not the Minecraft character, but like the actual creator, the streamer, the human person. In October, the year of 2020, in the blurry haze of the COVID pandemic, our favorite Minecraft white boys stood atop the peak looking down upon us mere mortals, and Minecraft Live took place. Just like they had every year, they had a vote to decide what new mob would be added to the game, and this year they had 3 complete models that they were showing us to choose between. The Iceologer, the Moo Bloom, and the Glow Squid. You know where we're going with this. Leading up to the vote, every Minecraft creator and their mom made it clear what their vote was and encouraged their community to vote alongside them. You know, it was a community thing. But as the 20-minute voting period began, Mr. Dream Minecraft spoke out. On his main account, he encouraged people to vote Glow Squid. But on his second account, he promised to follow people who would prove that they had voted Glow Squid by posting screenshots. Now, this was a joke that Dream had said he had done with his community previously. But previously, he wasn't the head of a major SMP that was daily dominating Twitch and Twitter with the kind of obsessive conviction only that which a million screaming girls in their bedroom could create. And before I get hate on that, that's a generalization and not an insult. The fact is, teenage girls have more dedication to things than any adult human I've ever seen. Every single creator and fandom should hope that their fan base is made of teenage girls. Those girls carry the fate of the internet in their hands, and I was proud to be one oh so long ago. Don't be ashamed of your teenage girls, embrace them, adore them, fear them, as they will make or break your career for the foreseeable future. Now, the vote went down and the Glow Squid did win, and the wrath of the Minecraft community descended upon Dream like Artemis and tore him limb from limb all across the entirety of the bird site. People claimed that Dream's influence was too large, that he had swayed the true community vote in his favor. In other words, he had abused his power. Dream tried to then backtrack and say he didn't think he had ruined anything and he didn't really care which mob won. Yeah, I'm real sure of that, bud. But regardless, here's the real thing. I don't think Dream really understood his position of power yet. He was a man who held over 10 million subscribers, yes, but on the same coin, he was only 21 years old, and he had blown up incredibly quickly, gaining over 10 million subscribers in only 1 year. Now, it's not an excuse, but it's definitely an explanation. He was used to being a popular but not viral creator who could make jokes with his community and not worry about any sort of backlash. The results would be essentially negligible. But this was his first taste of power, and not only the responsibilities that came with it, but the backlash and the dangers that came with wielding such a massive, violently dedicated fan base. Even Markiplier years ago had commented on the immense social power that influencers now hold with dedicated fan bases of not only the millions, but tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of fans. There is a fear to act, a cautious awareness that your opinions may be mirrored en masse, and that responsibility has to come along with that. If in 2012, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, and PewDiePie had decided to team up and form some sort of political coup by swaying the Democratic vote, the polling booths would have looked like the lines to VidCon, and we all would have been subjected to some dystopian fantasy alternate timeline where Septiplier would rule the country with an iron fist, and we would all consume our 3 Scary Games content for breakfast and pledge allegiance to the bro fist. Gods, how did I get here? Anyways, 2012 is over, YouTube is stale, and Twitch is banging, which means the power of the youth has shifted. New generation, new content platform, and a new group of white boys to overthrow the government. Now it's people like Dream, TommyInnit, and Ronbu that hold the same kind of massive power over millions of fans to convince people to think and act on their behalf. If Ronbu asked you to jump off a bridge, would you? Wouldn't you? Now, taking into the land of the fictional world of the Dream SMP, from here on, unless I specify, I am talking about characters and not content creators. So, who can we start to notice has power within a piece of media like this? Who can convince people to think and act the ways that they want them to? Please write down your inference onto your piece of paper. It is going to be required before you leave. Yes, you should have been taking notes, and no, you can't use the bathroom. The fact is, there are a lot of types of power. 7, actually, and I'm going to try my best to go over every single one of them and explain them in a way that scratches that ADHD hyperfixation info dump just right. And while this is a really fun video where the examples are from Minecraft roleplay, the fact is, the topic's actually really serious. If you understand the types of powers that there are, you can identify when someone is holding power over you and when they're using that power to get something they want. Of course, that means you can also be aware of when you hold that power over someone else and when you could use it to possibly benefit. Use it for good, use it for evil, what do I care? I'm not your dad. You could use this knowledge to realize that your mom is holding her power over you, escape an abusive household, and go live a happier life. Or you could turn around and use the knowledge to gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss your way to overthrowing a local government. I don't care, I'm down for anything, my schedule is open. Part 1, legitimate power. This is the type of power you think you want, you greedy little human. Well, you can't have it. In reality, you don't even actually want it. Legitimate power is power in titles. It comes from a hierarchy of people who tell people how to people properly. This is what people think power is. Boss has power over a worker, the teacher has power over a student, the parent has power over a child. Now, clearly there's an issue with that. This power exists in a title, a hierarchy, a name that just means you're in charge. It can be given and taken away with very little if those in the rest of the hierarchy suddenly choose to ignore said title. The "do this because I'm in charge and I said so" only really lasts so long unless you have some other form of power backing you up. That's why, despite being called legitimate power, the other name for this is titular power, the power of a title. Who on the Dream SMP holds that kind of powerful title? None other than the king of the Dream SMP herself, Eret. Eret was crowned the king of the SMP early on when L'Manberg first separated from the greater SMP faction. He had been part of the L'Manberg Revolution until Dream offered a title: betray L'Manberg and become king of the greater SMP. Eret thought this was a way to be on the winning side as well as ensuring some sort of future peace. They thought the title of power is what he wanted, that they would give them the control she needed to make some sort of real change. That's actually how we got the betrayal in the final control room and one of the most powerful lines in the entirety of the lore. Down with the revolution, boys. It was never meant to be. You could take down my revolution any day, queen. Now suddenly Eret had a title. King of the SMP. That was a title you could do things with, or so she thought. The fact was, Eret was actually a figurehead. He was someone who thought she held some sort of title, but didn't actually hold any real power. Eret was meant to just be neutral, sit pretty, and never take sides and be a good image for the greater SMP, since historically, everyone already hated Dream. Eret occasionally got to use their title. I mean, they built a castle, a throne, some watchtowers over L'Manberg, but it was never really consequential in any big way. When something finally came up that Eret wanted to use her power for, to help Pogtopia and her friends, the very act of choosing sides immediately stripped them of their title. In the end, Dream proved again and again that the power of the title meant nothing. It could be given and taken at will. Dream had once crowned George the king of the SMP, but had stripped him of that title with just a conversation. And from there, had placed that title on Eret. There was no war, no battle to fight. Dream simply said it was so, and thus the crown was moved from George to Eret. Nothing more than that. Going from front desk to supervisor to boss takes very little more than just a word of someone above you. You're the same person, most likely doing most of the same job. You're just owning a bigger title. That title might give you more resources or privilege or people below you, but in the end, the power is held by those above you with bigger titles and by the willingness of those beneath you to respect the title you wear. The title of king didn't hold any power Eret could truly use. It held a false title of power, of being above others, and Eret once said of respect. But a title of respect doesn't give you respect. Respect is earned through the actions that others deem brave and noble and good, not betraying your friends to earn a crown. It was something Eret would pay for and atone for the rest of his time on the SMP. So Eret had what some would call legitimate power, but clearly is better labeled as titular power and nothing more. Just a title. Without at least one of the other 6 forms of power, the reality is that titular power is worthless. It is only worth as much as those below you are willing to obey it. You don't listen to your boss or your teacher or your mom because of the title of boss or teacher or mom. In reality, that title never lasts forever. There's always another, more powerful reason, a different type of power that they also hold. Going over the next 6 types of power can kind of be broken down into pairs. First is what you can give and take from a person. The second is some form of internal knowledge and skill, and the final 2 are completely external. So which power do you hold? And which power have you felt wrap its claws around you? Let's find out. Part 2, rewards and consequences, specifically rewards. Sit, yeah, sit down. Oh, who's a good boy? Who's a good boy? You are an animal just like the rest of us. You get a reward, monkey brain is happy. Consequence, monkey brain sad. This is how power works. Reward and consequential power is exactly what it sounds like, the ability to give a reward or deal out a consequence with enough weight to influence others' actions. These are the positive and negative feedback loops of power dynamics. Reward power is the ability to get someone to think or do something you want based on the ability for you to reward them adequately. You remember the content creator dream stuff from earlier? Vote Glow Squid, get a follow on Twitter. Do as Streamer Boy says, get a reward. Monkey see, monkey do, monkey clap its little hands and behave like it's supposed to. That was a use of reward power. Now, it's usually quite rare to see reward power used alone, where if you obey, you are rewarded, but if you don't obey, there's no threat of punishment. Things remain unchanged. It's a positive feedback loop only. It's not easy to find examples of genuine reward power online, as usually what is portrayed as reward power is actually a form of thinly veiled coercive or consequential power, but we'll get back around to that. For now, let's focus on rewards. There is a man on the server who has been a man of great promises, offers great rewards, power, titles, money, someone who had none of those things, no power, no legacy, and built one for himself. And now he offers it out. All of it could be yours if you just take the gamble. Have you figured it out yet? Am I building anticipation? Are you on the edge of your seat? Have you shouted out the answer yet? Go on. You know you want to. Go ahead. Doesn't it feel good? Quackity was a servant under Schlatt during the reign of Manberg. He had no power, no pay, nothing. So when it all fell apart, there was no Manberg, no Schlatt, and Quackity had nothing to his name but the failure of his butcher army. So he stepped away, built himself a city he could use to gain power, influence, control, and gathered these powerful allies with grandiose promises of rewards unlike any they had seen. Quackity has always been a man of smooth talk. He knows how to play into someone's needs, to feed the desires that they keep to themselves, to offer reward not just in money or in gear or even in land, but to offer something bigger, meaning, significance. Quackity was offering a legacy. This is how he managed to acquire Foolish, Purpled, and Fundy to his side in Las Nevadas. Quackity had approached Foolish in his summer home with a proposal and a challenge. Quackity knew Foolish was strong, a warrior, and he was capable of massive projects, but Foolish's summer home, regardless of how grand and stunning the build was essentially abandoned. He had retired far from the SMP in search of peace, but therefore had no real legacy within the SMP itself. His build was hollow, and Quackity argued, so was Foolish. So he offered him a place, a new city, massive, stunning. It would be a hub for money, favors, and those that took the gamble on Las Nevadas would reap the rewards. Or he could do nothing. Foolish could stay in his oasis known to no one, with no power, no connections, and die without a legacy to leave behind. That's how Quackity used pure reward power. If Foolish chose not to side with Quackity, it wasn't a threat. He didn't plan to hunt Foolish down. He didn't plan to kill or attack or steal from him. He would just be left to his own nothingness. Life would remain as normal and nothing would ever change. Quackity was an expert at painting their current life as meaningless, gathering those already outcast by the rest of the SMP and offering rewards that they couldn't turn down. In the end, the fear of nothing changing is what caused Foolish to give in and accept those rewards from Quackity, regardless of what may come with it. Quackity went and destroyed Purpled's UFO, blew it up, and then offered in the same deal as he offered Foolish. Purpled already had very little influence within the server, and by destroying the UFO, he was suddenly left with nothing. No legacy, no proof he was ever even a part of the server. Quackity didn't threaten to continue blowing up anything he planned to build or hunt him down until he decided to join him. Quackity had simply showed how easy it was to wipe his legacy away, any tiny proof that Purpled was a part of this place. And then he did the same thing he did with Foolish, reached out a hand and offered something bigger, something better. Fundy was no different when it came to recruitment. Fundy was already lost. Without Lemanberg, he had nothing. So Quackity showed up at his savannah, showed him how the wind and sand had corroded the city that he loved so much, and Quackity made it clear that time would do the same to him. It would erode away Fundy's legacy and he would be forgotten. So he could stay, let the world forget his name, or join Quackity, join Las Nevadas, and have the power, the connections he had wanted for so long. Quackity was the master of reward power because he knew how to target those who already had nothing, those who would have nothing to lose. They didn't need to be threatened or coerced or twisted into joining him. All he needed to do was reach out a hand, offer them something they desired, and allow them to choose. This is a power that can be very easy to see and very hard to judge. Those who have nothing, who are already at their lowest, are very easy to have power over. Offer a neglected child attention and they will do nearly anything to receive it. Offer a starving child food and they are at your control. Quackity had offered Foolish, Purpled, and Fundy many things. A place to belong, a legacy, favors, and connections that they wouldn't have otherwise. But his intentions were not just to give them selflessly, but to have them under his control. They had to behave to Quackity's whims to receive those rewards, like a dog performing for a treat. Beware of those times when you have very little, what people ask you to do in return for any assistance that they offer. And in return, be aware of what you demand in response of others when you choose to reach out a hand. Some favors are fair and reasonable, and some can quickly snowball into manipulative control. Now, reward power can come in lots of shapes and forms, and while the reward can often be monetary or physical gains, such as money or important titles, such as the things Quackity had offered to those who followed him, it doesn't have to be physical rewards. Quackity had also offered meaning. He offered a legacy to leave behind. You can offer all forms of non-physical reward. Admittedly, one of the first people that came to mind when thinking of reward power was Wilbur Soot. See, Wilbur seems to have an incredible amount of emotional reward power, specifically over a little blonde-haired gremlin boy he calls his little brother. In the beginning of L'Manberg times, Wilbur could very easily influence Tommy to do just about whatever he wanted under the simple guise of, "I want you to." The reward in this sense was just making his older brother figure proud. It's a simple thing, but an important one. Tommy was earning Wilbur's favor. He was earning attention, even praise from him. By following Wilbur's orders, Tommy even gained other things like titles of power, leading closely alongside Wilbur as they founded their own country. And there was never the pressure of a hidden consequence behind Wilbur's words in the beginning. He didn't threaten Tommy, didn't attack him or withhold things from him. Either Tommy did what Wilbur asked and gained the reward of his favor, or he didn't, and things stayed exactly the same as they were. This non-physical reward is actually one of the types of power content creators recently hold over their fans. The content creators aren't going to attack you or hate you or bully you if you are the average, quiet, lurking fan. But there is a reward to be gained. Affection, attention, favor to be had from those that you look up to. This is often why fans partake in communities, posting comments or being active in chat, making edits or fan art, chasing that ever-elusive content creator interaction, a hit of praise, a single Twitter like from the person on the other side of the screen. The larger a content creator continues to get, the harder it is to be that one person, the singular fan that day that might receive that interaction. But it doesn't have to be a big content creator. If someone looks up to you in any way, even if it is a single viewer of a Twitch stream, or if it's your younger brother, you hold power over them. By being someone's idol, the person that someone looks up to, your attention becomes a reward. This is one of the reasons there is a danger in content creators interacting with fans, particularly in private. Fans of a creator are often eager to please them, to receive praise or attention from the people that they look up to. So asking something of a fan is dangerous, as they're more than likely to always say yes to you. It's easy to realize that you will always receive a yes from your fans and slip into a habit of using and even abusing that power, manipulating fans simply by knowing they would do anything for you. We all know that Tommy looks up to Wilbur, wants to please him, so we can see when Wilbur uses that fact, that power of his affection, as a way to control what Tommy does. It's manipulation, dangling his affection in front of Tommy like a gift anytime he questions what he says. Despite that, there's a reason that what Wilbur has over Tommy is not reward power, why it's different than the interaction between creator and fan. Wilbur and Tommy in the lore are brothers. Wilbur is already solidly proud of Tommy. Tommy already had his favor from the very beginning, his attention, his love. That is the baseline. All that Wilbur does is for Tommy. Tommy never had to earn that reward. But once Wilbur realizes how important it is to Tommy, and he wants something from the child, suddenly he can use this as leverage. There isn't a reward to be gained, there's something to be lost. And suddenly we find ourselves in consequential power. We exist in a state of neutrality at all times. And within a power dynamic, the other person holds the ability to cause something to be gained or lost from the sense of neutral. Reward means there is something to be gained from your base level, and consequence means there was something to be lost. Wilbur already cared deeply for Tommy. He already had. It was the baseline. There was no love or affection to be gained, only love and affection to be lost. This was the consequence of Tommy not obeying. Part 3, reward and consequence, but this time it's consequence. The reverse of rewarding, when there is nothing to gain but rather to lose, is coercive power. This is punishment. There's no offer of reward, no positive reinforcement, just obey or suffer my wrath. This is actually what most parents and teachers exercise, as compliance is required based on their titular power, their title, remember from the beginning? So any good behavior isn't rewarded, it's simply expected. Therefore, bad behavior is then punished. Your parents expect you to get an A, therefore there is no reward for doing so. But anything below that, a B or lower, then you'll receive a punishment. This seems fairly cut and dry. Imagine any time a character threatens another character on the SMP. Quackity threatening Technoblade with the Butcher Army. Technoblade threatening to kill everyone unless government was abolished. Sam threatening Ponk for the keycard. Anytime you hear the words, do this or I'll do that, is that person using the power of consequence. If anyone on the server excels at coercive power, it is the server owner character himself and resident villain, Dream. He uses a lot of baseline coercive power, also just known as threats.
You're gonna come with me, or I'm gonna burn your disc. So if you are not exiled from L'Manberg, I will build these walls until they've reached this block limit. If you do not surrender, I want to see white flags outside your base by tomorrow at dawn, or you are dead!
And as you can tell, these are usually directed at a little blonde-haired gremlin from earlier once again. Listen, Tommy's not exactly a great character either, but damn does he get manipulated a lot in these stories. Now, let's be clear about a concept that can be a little bit hard to grasp. The removal of a consequence is not a reward. Let me say that again. The removal of a consequence, returning back to baseline, is not a reward. Remember, a reward is something that benefits you outside of your normal baseline. Therefore, a safe return to normal, removal of a consequence if you comply, is not a reward, it is consequential power. And that is where Dream excels at being more than just a bully, more than just giving vague threats with his power. He's coercive, manipulative. He phrases things to feel like a reward for obeying him. He twists his words and intentions so it's not him forcing you to comply. You could do nothing, but you would suffer the consequences he has then laid out. He makes you think you really want to do what he says. He has the power to influence you in such a way that you believe he is giving you mercy, giving you a way out of the prison he built around you with his own two hands, handing you the ladder into a hole he threw you down. When coercive power is direct, do this or else, it's easy to spot and point out as clearly manipulative. But there's a subtle version that can be far more damaging, and that's when the person with power puts you into a bad or dangerous situation and claims that it is your own fault and promises to remove you from that situation if only you obey. Exile arc was easily the darkest arc of the Dream SMP. Tommy was isolated from everyone he knew, lost all of his possessions, and was constantly tormented by Dream. This seems like obvious coercive power, but do you remember what I said about baselines? Anything that places above our baseline is a reward. Anything that places below our baseline is punishment. But the thing is, Dream controlled all aspects of Exile. He controlled Tommy's environment and slowly but surely convinced Tommy that he deserved to be there. That this horrible type of living cold and alone was Tommy's normal. This cycle of abuse and control was so consistent and complete for months that it became a false baseline. Abuse became the normal. For many people in long-term abusive households or relationships, the abuse and the control in their life becomes their normal, their new baseline. This isn't just romantic relationships. This can be children raised in abusive households where abuse just is the normal, and complying with their abuser gains them rewards, a break from the abuse. There is no way I can see to paint coercive power as anything excusable. At its lowest, it is bullying, and at its worst, it is prolonged, extensive abuse. So instead of every day feeling like a consequence, days where they aren't abused, days where Tommy's items aren't stolen or blown up, feel like a reward. The return to normal peace or happiness feels like a reward from their abuser. And the attacks, the hitting him, stealing his things, blowing up his house, and isolating him no longer feel like a consequence. It becomes what Tommy expects. It ends up feeling deserved when in reality, we know it never was. Abuse is never deserved. There is nothing in this world you or anyone else could do that would deserve abuse as a consequence. And I mean that. During Exile Arc, it was chilling to watch in live time as day by day Tommy logged on and we watched his normal settle into this new abusive low, the color literally draining from his character. And it settled a newfound fear in many of Tommy's viewers, a fear of this abusive and manipulative character stretching this newfound coercive power. Dream became a horrifying, abusive, true villain for the first time in many people's eyes. Through this was actually the birth of a new fandom expectation, the separation of C! And CC! Names. The Dream SMP presented a whole world of problems when it came to fan discussion, as the characters in the roleplay bore the same names as real people who played them. So when fans would take to Twitter to express their emotions on the new roleplay arc, it became concerning to read tweets like, "Dream is manipulating and abusing a child. Tommy didn't deserve this." That message seems horrifying to come across on Twitter, the idea of a bigger content creator manipulating this young streamer. So with how Dark Exile arc got, it became the precedent that you have to state if you are talking about character or content creator by writing C Tommy or CC Tommy. And for a while, people also added /RP to mean roleplay at the beginning of any tweet referring to the story. This idea has actually continued to expand for every new iteration of the character based on these bases, such as O Tommy for Origins, P Tommy for Passerine, or even just general Fic Tommy. C! Tommy is the only canon version of this character, and even then, half of the content is completely made up of fan interpretations of semi-lore based moments. At this point, nothing is canon, everything is made up by fans, and the members of the Dream SMP are my OCs, okay? I feel like we've gotten off track. Part 4, Expertise. What does it take to be an expert? To not just be good or great, but the best at your craft. There is one man on this server who knows better than any. Technoblade. As some may know or some don't, being absolutely cracked at the game was not actually a part of Technoblade's character. Technoblade is a unique situation. His character in the Dream SMP didn't have power because of connections or admiration or rewards within the story of the lore. Technoblade was powerful because as a content creator, Technoblade was absolutely, terrifyingly undefeatable. To really understand the expert power Techno held within the server, you need to understand the expert power he held outside of the server as well. Technoblade is often revered as one of the best and quite possibly most unhinged players of Minecraft, especially when it comes to determination. In terms of PvP and skill, he was unmatched for a very long time. He was the first to hit a 1,000 win streak on Bed Wars and ended up with a 1,400 win streak. He beat Dream in MrBeast's $10,000 1v1 duel 6-4. He held the #1 individual as well as the #1 team spots in Minecraft Ultimate, as well as setting the highest scores for both individual and team kills. He won 4 weeks of Minecraft Monday and 2 weeks of Minecraft Championships. Over his time on Hypixel, Technoblade ended up playing a total of 4,946 games of Bed Wars. He lost 32 of those. This man is a legend for a reason. Let's take it a step further. Not just skill, but inhuman determination. The Potato War is available in all of its glory on YouTube, so please go watch that and subscribe to Technoblade if you haven't already. Trust me, it is worth the watch, but for my point here, I'm going to sum it up. Technoblade had accidentally become one of the top 10 potato farmers on all of Hypixel Skyblock, and for some reason lost to us mortals, he wanted to be #1. And so, for 8 months, he did just that. He did research, spied, did the math, charted progress, sabotaged his rival to the point where he had to stop to question if purposefully causing sleep deprivation was a war crime. He perfected his armor, his minions, his pets, his farm, his supplies, his technique. And then he farmed. By hand, averaging 18 hours a day in the final stretches of the war. And did he win? Did he win? Did you hear any of what I just said? Yes, of course he won. He was quoting Sun Tzu's Art of War in farming potatoes on Minecraft. No one, not even Squid Kid, was nearly as insane as Technoblade was. Technoblade was one of the best Minecraft players of his time and was unafraid to put in hours of hard work. And on the Dream SMP, your playstyle translated to your lore. He was ready and willing to mine netherite for hours to get more than one full set of tools and gear for himself and whoever else he trusted. Not to mention farming enough wither skeleton skulls to blow up most of the server. Technoblade didn't need to build an empire to have power. He could 1v the entire server and win. That is why he had power. He was an expert. Expert power is one of the forms of true power. Internal, earned levels of power that cannot be taken from you and do not depend on the external emotions of anyone else. No matter who likes or dislikes him, no matter what you do or do not have, no matter who you do or don't know, expertise in your craft is something you always have. Expert power very simply comes from being the best at what you do, and Techno has it down. In every single battle he has come across, Techno showed up well prepared, fast acting, and dead strong. He also has a habit of being a lone soldier. Rather than gathering others to work beside him when he needs extra hit power, he turns to potions, armies of dogs, and even withers. He didn't need extra people. He was strong enough on his own. He needed distractions and destruction so that he could single people out and destroy them. Besides, dogs and withers don't have ulterior motives. They can't turn against you mid-battle. And more than that, they don't create emotional attachments, the things that make you weak. Techno had worked alongside Tommy in getting L'Manberg back from Schlatt, and of course, any side Techno is on is essentially ensured victory. He managed to gear up the entire Pogtopia rebellion and secure their win in destroying Manberg. Except that's where their intentions began to differ. Techno didn't want to reinstate a new government of L'Manberg. He wanted all governments gone for good. So he turned on the rest of the rebellion. Anyone else would have been crazy to turn on an entire rebellion that you just geared up and declare them enemies to their faces. Except Techno, who was quick to release 2 withers, kill everyone on both sides several times, and leave the ground smoking behind him. When the Red Banquet took place, who did Quackity bring along to subdue the Eggpire? Technoblade. His enemy? Sure, and also the strongest man on the server. Who did Tubbo ask to help save his child from Sam? Eret and Technoblade. The king and the killer of kings. Who broke Dream, Ronbu, and Connor Eats Pants out of the impenetrable fortress of Pandora's box? The only man who could. Technoblade. There has been only one weakness that comes up in all that Techno does, the only thing we have ever seen him flustered or overwhelmed by, and that is his loyalty to those he cares about. He may sometimes seem cold or uncaring, but when Techno cares for someone, he will go to great, unprecedented lengths to protect him, and when he is wronged, he will return the favor. While expert power can be one of the hardest to gain, as there is no shortcut or pay-to-win way to gain expertise in a subject, it's also, in truth, one of the most accessible. If you have access to the internet, which most people do in some form, you have unlimited knowledge at your fingertips. Learn something, a language, a skill, a new method. Find a skill and hone it. With time and some effort, anyone can gain this power regardless of the outside circumstances around them. And you don't have to be the best at what you do. If you're the only one in your friend group who can speak Spanish, or sew clothes, or fix a computer, you have become the expert. People turn to you. They'll want you as a connection, and you become a powerful and therefore essential ally. And by using your expertise to gain favors, people become indebted to you. You've gained power. The important part once you have expert power is to remind yourself of your value. You are the expert. You hold the power. But it's easy with manipulation for others to build shame and doubt within you, that since you're the expert, you have to help those other people, that you somehow owe that to them. Those who hold the power of connections, something we'll cover later, will seek you out. You will be a tool to be used, and that knowing you gives them power, not that you are powerful in yourself. It is important when you have this type of power to remember that you are not a tool to be used, and Techno was stern in that. He retired to the Arctic with Phil, tired of being used to win other people's wars, always called on when they needed or wanted him to kill for them, and still, they managed to drag him back into their confrontations. As for the opposite, it's easy to know when those with expert power are using that against you, dangling it over your head to have control. You'll often hear, well, I'm the only one who knows how to do that. You need me. But remember what I said. Expert power is obtainable by everyone. All you need is time and effort. Anything they know how to do, you can learn. Don't let others abuse their expert power to control you for their own benefits. Know your worth. You are always capable of becoming the expert. It may take 8 months of farming potatoes or writing a 12,000 word script on the Dream SMP, but hey, anything's possible. Part 5, Informational Power. True or internal power comes from 2 sources. What you can do, fight, sewing, speaking fluent Endirian, is labeled expert power. But what you know is informational power. Who knows what about anything and everything? This is the power of knowing what others don't. Secrets, hidden trap cards, double agents. The more you know, the more power you hold. But the more people who share that knowledge, the less powerful it becomes. And there is one overlooked b-boy that I think fits the bill. Tubbo, while not usually leading the charge, has been a part of most of the largest lore within the entire server, from the birth of the Disc Wars pre-L'Manberg to the very bitter end of the SMP. Tubbo has been there. During the arc of Manberg and Pogtopia, Tubbo became one of the spies working under Schlatt's administration. He wasn't exiled like Tommy and Wilbur were, so for the time, he worked under Schlatt and visited Pogtopia secretly to share how Manberg was faring. He held the power of knowing the plans and going-ons of both sides of the war, although the information would eventually come out into the open. That is the unique part of informational power. It is often time-sensitive, the power fleeting once the war or project or event has ended. Informational power can be lost just as quickly as it can be gained. The moment the Pogtopia versus Manberg War took place, any information Tubbo held as a spy was no longer needed, and the power he held was gone. To continue to hold informational power, you need to continue to be the only one to hold that information, which can mean constantly needing to gather more information. After the war to take back L'Manberg, Tubbo didn't need to immediately regain informational power, as he suddenly found himself the president of a crater, L'Manberg. This was his newfound titular power, which actually came with access to informational power just by being president. He had knowledge of the Butcher army. He was the only one who knew how the interaction with Dream would go the day that he exiled Tommy. But none of this was really significant enough to wield real power. Quackity was the one to lead the Butcher army, and although Tubbo knew he was going to hand over Tommy, all he was really doing was bending to Dream's demands. Tubbo held very little power in his role as president, interpreting keeping peace as bending to Dream's will as often as needed to avoid a war. But when it was all over, when Dream and Techno and Phil had destroyed L'Manberg down to bedrock and there was no rebuilding, Tubbo moved on to new lands. He created the country of Snowchester with Rambu, building a giant hotel and an entire town, his own home country to protect with no tainted history or ghosts of Wilbur lurking on the grounds. But he knew he needed power as the server continued to get more dangerous and violent, so he turned back to the type of power he knew best, informational. He didn't need the strength of Techno or the rewards of Quackity. What he needed was a trap card, an ace in his sleeve, some secret information he could hold over others, informational power that would ensure that no one touched his country, a power no one had even considered yet. Part 5.5, nukes. Yeah, you heard me. Tubbo built nukes, actual giant nuclear bombs. He called this Project Early Dawn and began testing nuclear weapons. He had scientific knowledge that no one on the server had, the ability to build and launch actual nukes. I know I keep saying it, but this is insane. The dude invented nukes on a Minecraft server. Who does that? Anyways, this became Tubbo's power. Now, nukes are a type of power all their own. He didn't need to threaten people with them. He didn't need to reward people with access to them. All he needed was the information, the knowledge that his country simply had nukes. And should anything go wrong, should anyone step to him or his family, he could obliterate them and all that they knew. It's a pretty wild trap card. Taking it a step further, during Project Early Dawn, one of the nukes went missing. Yes, an entire nuclear bomb just gone. Except if we know one thing, we know that Tubbo values the power of information. The missing nuke went missing for nothing more than appearances. Tubbo had it in his possession the entire time. He needed a failsafe, information only he knew, not even including the others of his country like Jack or Ronbu. In mirror fashion to Wilbur's TNT when Tubbo was young in L'Manberg, this became Tubbo's version of Chekhov's nuke. Gun. You get it. Chekhov's gun is a literary element used by writers that states that every element of a story should be relevant. Therefore, if something is shown, it must be used. The name specifically refers to the idea that if a gun is shown in the opening of a scene, that it needs to go off by the end of the movie. And go off, it would. When the Dream SMP was coming to its end, Tubbo reconnected with a broken, disheveled Tommy who had been hiding underground using invisibility potions to move around the server unseen for months. His fear of Dream had driven him to near madness levels of paranoia. He was a shell of the friend that Tubbo had once known. He was scared, broken, and above all, desperate. Desperate to take down Dream once and for all. So of course Tubbo and Tommy tried to take him on headfirst, and when that failed spectacularly, they needed a new plan to kill Dream and Puns in one fell swoop. What better way than a secret missing nuke? Now, both Tubbo and Tommy held true informational power over Dream, stronger than any physical strength. Dream could try to use as much consequence or reward power as he wanted, but in the end, it wouldn't matter because Tommy and Tubbo knew what he didn't, and that is what gave them power. Tommy went off to distract Dream and Puns, keep them together in one room, while Tubbo would send the nuke to their location and kill all three of them at the same time. But here is where informational power can fail you. The final nuke was a secret. Launching it at the prison to kill Dream, Puns, and Tommy playing the martyr was a secret. So when Jack Manifold got the ping that a nuke was being prepped, since the missing nuke was still linked to him as part of Project Early Dawn, he came to the launch site. He assumed Tubbo had meant to ping him, like a silent cry for Jack to act. And so, Jack changed the nuke's coordinates, aimed them straight for Tommy's house since Jack decided it was Tommy who was always causing problems and starting fights, that the server would be better off without him. Had Tubbo told Jack about the nuke, or about the plan to kill Dream, or even the fact that Tommy wasn't at his base but was already at the prison, meant to die, maybe things would have been different. But Tubbo needed that informational power to hold the secret that no one else knew, because maybe sharing that information would have saved people. But 2 can't keep a secret, and 3 is means for disaster. So when Jack tried to reroute the nuke he didn't understand how to work. The nuke he didn't actually know was 9 nukes meant to split and drop at the same time. He only rerouted one of those. By doing so, that one nuke would blow up early, scattering the other 8 nukes across the entirety of the SMP, effectively killing anyone who didn't escape and destroying any trace of the entire server. He had doomed everyone. An end that came from the abuse of informational knowledge. The power of secrets can easily flip from giving you the upper hand to everything you worked for being ruined by those who never even knew you had a plan. Secrets can give you incredible power over other people, but they are just as likely to blow up in your face or all over a server. And when they do, they will take everything down with them. Now, informational power being held over you is a completely different type of beast. Secrets, blackmail, your own information being held against you. No matter how careful or secretive you are, there's always a chance that someone learns something you didn't want other people to know. But remember, there is a caveat to informational power. The more people who know the information, the weaker that power becomes. It may never remove the damage that secret may cause, but you can remove the power someone else has over you by taking it into your own hands, Alexander Hamilton style. Rather than fearing the blackmail his political opponents had on him by knowing about his affair, Alexander Hamilton published his own affair publicly in the newspaper for all to see. Was it insane? Maybe, but in the end, even though the damage was still done, Hamilton remained the one in control of his life, rather than dancing to the demands of those who could threaten to reveal his secrets. Informational power is a tricky master, hard to gain and even harder to keep. Easily the most fickle form of power on the list, and if it gets out of hand, it is easy to lose the respect and the trust of those around you, something that would also quickly lose you the next 2 types of power if ever you once held them. Part 6, Referent Power. All I know is everybody loves you. Referent and connection power are all about who you know and who knows you, the power of people. To start, referent power is entirely about who likes you, who looks up to you, who wants to, needs to, would die to be like you. Now, this type of power is super easy to confuse with both reward and coercive power, so I needed to go to some outside sources. To quote The Basis of Social Power, written by John French and Bertram Raven of 1959, if a member is attracted to a group and he conforms to its norms only because he fears ridicule or expulsion from the group for nonconformity, we would call this coercive power. In the other hand, if he conforms in order to obtain praise for conformity, it is a case of reward power. To the extent the P avoids discomfort or gains satisfaction by conformity based on identification regardless of O's responses, we are dealing with referent power. Now that's a lot of words, but what this means is the basis of referent power cannot be based on fear of rejection or desire of praise from the object that holds power. Rather, this is from the innate desire to be like or be associated with the holder of said power. This is an almost entirely passive form of power. You are influencing the way someone acts, thinks, or behaves, but simply through being a role model they wish to emulate, and not by any form of active participation in their life. They want to be like you, act like you, be compared to you. You play no active role in praising or shaming them. You simply exist as a paradigm to those you are influencing. This is admittedly the type of power that most celebrities held over their fans before the rise of content creator interaction. Most influencers rarely or hardly interacted with fans before social media, especially if the number of fans was within the millions. So the reward of the attention or the fear of the rejection by the actual influencer was incredibly unlikely. Therefore, any power that they held was referential. If you see a picture of a celebrity wearing a dress and the next week every girl in school is wearing that outfit, that's referent power at work. They wish to mimic the item of their affection, be compared to them. The influencer is controlling how one acts simply by existing in a public space. Oscar Wilde did say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I know it's not Dream SMP, but for a moment think Klaus Hargreaves and his cult from the Umbrella Academy. People in that cult wanted to be like Klaus, regardless of a lack of praise or punishment he ever gave to them. He was simply a role model, the person everyone wanted to be just like. I mean, come on, I would give away my left leg to be even slightly more Klaus-like. Now, at first you might be thinking, who in the Dream SMP is a good role model? Most of them are deranged or violent in some way or another, and very few are really inspiring others to be like them. Except one. The fearless, brave leader of a rebellion nation, the first to stand up to dream by demanding liberation, the wild, reckless, spiraling, flaming wreck known as Wilbur Soot. I didn't say they had to be good people to inspire action. Wilbur Soot had an incredible amount of power on the Dream SMP, but why? He didn't command his nation through threats. He didn't have legacies to offer as a reward. He had no title when it all began. He wasn't exceptionally experienced or strong, but Wilbur had one shining quality that gave him power. Charisma. He was bold, confident when he walked, eloquent when he spoke. He could rally people around his speeches of freedom and dreams of some peaceful nation he could run. He gathered children, Tommy, Tubbo, and Fundy, some of the youngest members on the SMP, with Fundy being his canonical child and Tommy being the equivalent of a younger brother. Wilbur was already an idol. Tommy looked up to his older brother, Fundy looked up to his father, and Tubbo looked up to the man who promised belonging and freedom. Wilbur had power when he began L'Manberg, but it wasn't the power that people thought it was, the power of a president. That title meant nothing in the beginning. Rather, he had referent power. He ran a nation of children who looked up to and wanted to be like him, and therefore would follow him to the ends of the earth. They would build for him, fight for him, and all of these children would die for him. And die they did. If Wilbur had simply worn the title of president of L'Manberg and told them they had to obey because he was president, it wouldn't have meant a thing. After all, that's what Dream had done. The only reason his titular power held enough strength was the referent power that stood behind it. The citizens of L'Manberg adored their president and were happy to follow his lead. Wilbur was eager to prove this as well, to prove that he didn't just take the title of president, but that he had earned it, really deserved it, that he wasn't like Dream, wasn't a tyrant, even if he had no intention of actually giving up his power. So he held an election. The same election that spiraled to those outside of his control, that he had no referent power over. The same election that lost him his country. But did Tommy stay with L'Manberg, the country he had died for to earn its independence? Follow Schlatt, who now wore that title of president? No. Tommy was exiled beside Wilbur, and both Tubbo and Fundy acted as spies for him beneath Schlatt. That title had meant nothing, because even without it, these kids looked up to Wilbur. He still held the same power over them. As Wilbur descended into madness, these bonds dissolved. As he blew up their nation, allowed Tubbo to be executed, and died himself, many lost that reverence. He had seemingly gone mad with power, spiraled at its loss, and Tubbo and Fundy eventually turned from him, and Wilbur's power over him faded. But the child soldiers of his nation weren't the only people Wilbur held referent power over. Quackity saw what Wilbur had, saw him build a nation from nothing, saw him gain power. He wanted a part of that, but was turned away from L'Manberg in its earliest days. When he spoke to Wilbur, he talked about seeing the good in people, about wanting there to be better. But Wilbur was clear that while everyone has a good side, that good side is not for anyone but themselves. That at the core, all people are selfish. If Quackity wanted power, he would have to learn that and take it. That message stuck. As Quackity worked under Schlatt, earned nothing, gained nothing, and was left with nothing when it all fell apart. And when Quackity stepped away, built his own nation of Las Nevadas in the shadow of Wilbur Soot, he left him a message. A book to tell Wilbur he was right. Wilbur took that as an invitation to Las Nevadas when, in the end, Quackity finally had his revenge and turned Wilbur away at the gate as Wilbur had him so long ago. He had become just like Wilbur, what he had wanted for so long, but it was clear through their continued rivalry, Quackity took a long time to see that Wilbur was not to be admired and lose that referent power that he held for so long. There was something that Quackity learned from Wilbur and that they both understood when building their own countries and securing their own power. While Quackity used reward and Wilbur used referential power, they both gathered a very strong type of power from those connections. And there is one person on this server with more connections than anyone else. A little blonde-haired gremlin we have seen manipulated again and again. This is his turn to shine. Part 7, Connection Power. I don't know if that was worth the shot. Tommy Innit, the golden-haired hero, the delinquent raccoon, the annoying antagonizer, the loyal friend, the obnoxious optimist, the traumatized child of the Dream SMP. No one held more connections than this kid. Connection power has next to nothing to do with the power you yourself hold over others, and everything to do with who you know. Tommy Innit has been used as an example in several of these scenarios, but never as the one with power, always the one who's being used or manipulated in some way, by Dream or Wilbur or anyone else. Tommy has very little power himself. In reality, he's not the best fighter, he's not the most experienced, and he has very little to offer to others, being relatively poor for the majority of the server. But for the most part, he was an optimist. Bubbly, loud, and excitable, as bright as the sun and with just as much gravity that draws people to him. Not like the weak or the vulnerable were drawn to Wilbur as some sort of leader or savior. But for Tommy, it was the strong people of the server who were drawn to him, determined to protect the innocent, happy child many saw him as, and his friends were drawn to him by his honest and loyal nature. That is, of course, excluding people who saw him as an annoying pest or an immature, selfish child, which, to be fair, was a lot of them. There were a number of people, often powerful people, who Tommy could call upon when he needed. People like Sam Nook, Errit, Captain Puffy, and Rambu, all of which who have defended, protected, or helped Tommy in a number of different ways. A popular group of the SMP, referred to as SBI, or the Sleepy Boys Incorporated, consists of Filza, the Hardcore King, Technoblade, the Blood God, Wilbur, the Insane President, and Tommy Innit, the child soldier. The group is often drawn as Tommy, the young and innocent child, and his three violent and often insane protective older brothers and father figure. In times of trial, Tommy has often referred to those around him to help solve his issues, take down his opposers, or just protect him. During all of Pogtopia and the War of Manberg, Tommy turned to Technoblade. No matter how strong Dream was, he was convinced Technoblade was stronger. Dream has an army, we have the Blade. There was no competition. And of course, at the end of the day, Tommy was right. When they fought to take Manberg back from Pogtopia, Techno, with some potions and some dogs, was able to essentially 1v everyone at the festival. And despite his betrayal not long after, when it was Tommy and Tubbo against Dream for Manberg, Tommy suggested Techno again. He was Tommy's strongest connection after all. And when it all went bad, after exile and the horrors that Dream put him through, it was Techno and Phil that Tommy ran to. Phil and Technoblade proved to be invaluable connections. They kept Tommy safe, housed him after exile, and Techno even personally hid him, lying directly to Dream to keep him safe. Even if he was absolutely annoyed by Tommy eating his golden apples and building cobblestone towers the entire time. They're brothers, Your Honor. While Phil provided a fatherly connection to help Tommy talk through and process his trauma from Dream, Techno took a different approach. He helped Tommy to re-gear up, face off against Dream, and take revenge on Manberg. Tommy agreed to follow Techno in committing minor terrorism as long as they got back Tommy's discs. Now, obviously that didn't go exactly as planned when Tommy turned on Techno. This was the moment that Techno realized Tommy had been using him for connections power. He had been willing to fight for Tommy, support him, protect him, and in that moment, realized that Tommy had used him for safety and his strength. He had been a connection that Tommy needed, and suddenly he wasn't needed. It's a difficult moment, but Techno recognized this and stepped away feeling betrayed and hurt. In the end, when Techno and Phil were invaluable connections, they weren't Tommy's only connections. Despite the family headcanons of the Sleepy Boys, there is one person Tommy had an even closer bond with. The only person he would betray Technoblade for, someone close enough to earn the title Clingy Duo, his Tubbo. Tubbo had been beside Tommy since literally day one, before there was even true lore taking place within the server. They fought Dream together at every war. They stood beside each other at nearly every turn, the only major exclusion to their dedication being Exile Arc. And even then, during the longest time that they were separated, they each held compasses that led them back to each other, and Tubbo often watched Tommy from a distance. Tubbo was the strongest connection Tommy had, but it wasn't physical strength Tubbo had that Tommy needed. It was the strength of his devotion to Tommy. So when the server, or maybe just Tommy, was broken beyond repair, he went to Tubbo once more, begged him to help take down Dream once and for all. Tubbo is smart. He knew Dream was stronger, faster, that they stood no chance, should plan and strike in secret, use brains over brawn. But when it comes to Tommy, Tubbo has never been able to say no. So he said yes to fighting Dream face on like Tommy wanted, and nearly won before being trapped. And when Tubbo learned that only one person could escape the trap alone, he didn't think. Didn't even hesitate to offer his life to save Tommy, immediately suggested he jump so that Tommy could live. Connections don't always have to be to those who have everything, wealth and power and skills to offer you. Sometimes the connection we need most is the person who would be there without hesitation, the person who would take the bullet for us, who would sacrifice all that they have for us. And Tubbo offering his life is the moment that Tommy realized that, and he finally gave up the discs, the only things he had ever chosen over Tubbo time and time again, threw them into the lava and saved them both. And still, at the end of all that, he asked more of Tubbo. One final thing. To use Tubbo's hidden trap card, his informational power, his nuke. Tommy offered to stay in the prison so that he could keep Dream and Puns there at the same time, so the nuke would kill all three of them at once. The only way to make sure that they never came back. Tommy decided it was the only way to save the server. And once again, Tubbo was sure there was a better way, sure that they could think of another plan, a stealth attack The discs were gone. Surely things could change. But this was his Tommy, asking him to do the impossible. To kill him and save the server. And Tubbo could never say no to Tommy. As we all know, this plan failed spectacularly. So what did Tubbo do in his last moments alive? He ran. Not away from the danger, but towards it. Towards Tommy. He ran to the prison, tried to break in, to reach Tommy until the alarms went off and he realized it was too late. The doors were locked. So with the last moments alive, he took out the bench he had built with Tommy, sat down one room away from him, and watched the world end. Tommy died thinking he was a hero, that his sacrifice had saved the server. And Tubbo died how he lived, for Tommy. The power of connections is something that runs deep. I won't claim that Tubbo was a victim of Tommy's power of connections. Maybe Technoblade had been, called upon and used when Tommy needed him, and turned on when Tommy didn't. Maybe Phil was used for emotional assurances and housing. Maybe Sam Nook was simply used to construct his hotel. Or maybe those people simply cared about Tommy, did things for him, protected him, because at some level he was important to them. That Phil really did take him in like a long-lost son. That Techno really did see him like a younger brother. Tommy's emotional connections were not one-sided. He cared for people as well, gave his life for his country, took the entire blame for Rambu burning George's house, gave up his discs for Tubbo in the very end. The power of connections can be strictly business transactions. Knowing the king or being friends with the strongest member of the server can give you a certain level of its power simply by association. And it's important to recognize when a relationship has become simply transactional, when someone is benefiting from knowing you without you receiving anything in return. But connections can run deeper than just transactions. Connections can be friendships, brotherhoods, people you would live and die for. And when that connection goes both ways, when that power is shared by both parties, that is a power hard to find and more often than not is for life. Quackity, Dream, Technoblade, Tubbo, Wilbur, Tommy. Some of the most powerful people on the Dream SMP, but clearly not the only ones with power. Everyone had power in their own unique ways. Rambu's informational power about Dream locked behind his Enderwalk state. Foolish's expert power of building, Sam's titular power as warden. Everyone holds a form of power, and everyone is just as likely to be subjected to somebody else's. But there is a power in knowledge, informational power specifically. Most people cannot name the types of powers, cannot identify them, don't know how to use them nor escape them. But now, you do. You're here. By watching this, you have gained informational power. But remember the dangerous, fickle nature of informational power. Sometimes with knowledge comes not only power, but burden. You can see power in every exchange now, but at what cost? Look at your parents. What power do they hold over you? Are they using titular power to excuse their treatment of you? Consequence power to demand obedience from you? Look at your friendships. Are you simply an expert to use? A connection from someone's web of connective power? Look at yourself. Who do you hold in your control? Are you using reward power to keep your friends around? Abusing the referent power of your little siblings looking up to you to get them to do what you want? Are you being controlled? Are you abusing your power? God, no, no, oh God, okay, hold on, listen, no. Part 8, Power Dynamics. I realized while writing this that the more you start to know about power, the more you see it in every interaction you have. You start to wonder if asking for favors is you abusing your power, or if your friend always asking for your advice means that you're somehow being used. The fact is that it's not so black and white. When we talk about power, we always talk about it in terms of power dynamics. This doesn't just refer to the type of power one may have, but to the level of power and the exchange of power being made. Just by having a lot of power, or even by using that power, it doesn't always mean that you are abusing it or manipulating people. Power can be used in healthy ways. If Tommy asks Tubbo for a favor, he is using his power of connections, or maybe even referent power, since early on, Tubbo really admired Tommy. But Tommy isn't on a higher level of power than Tubbo, and likely, Tubbo can ask for a favor in return. They're friends. They stand on the same level and are as likely to help each other out. Friendship is often a series of power exchanges in both directions. I scratch your back, you scratch mine. Not every friendship has these exchanges, but they are fair and perfectly healthy. Now, if Tommy asks Technoblade for a favor, that exchange can look a bit different. Tommy is asking to use Techno's power of expertise, and likely has nothing of value to offer in return. Of course, that doesn't automatically make it unhealthy. Techno cared deeply for Tommy, and likely would do the favor without asking for anything in return. People on vastly different power levels can be friends, as long as both are happy in the situation. It's when Tommy used Techno's power of expertise over and over and over, even when Techno made it clear he no longer wanted to be used as a weapon, only to be turned on when Tommy no longer needed him. This was no longer an exchange, it was use, and that was what made the dynamic unhealthy. Referent power is one that relies heavily on scale as well. Your younger sibling likely looks up to you and wants to mimic what you do. Because of that, there's a certain responsibility to set a good example for them, to keep in mind that your actions and words are being watched closely and may be mimicked in them. If you wake up every day and talk poorly about yourself, stare at your reflection, comment on weight and dieting, there is a worry that they will pick up those same unhealthy habits they see in you. Although no matter how much they wish to be like you, on the same hand, it's your sibling's own responsibility to follow their own life, and you are still free to express yourself, to live as a human. You don't have to walk on eggshells if you don't want to. Your sibling is only one person you may influence. But zoom out. Now look at a major content creator, an influencer. Now imagine that every picture that you post, every video you make, every comment or tweet online is about weight, dieting, or body checking. It's no longer one sibling you are influencing anymore. It could be hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. The damage could be so much more expansive the larger your scale of influence. If your sibling is an artist, asking them to draw you something for free may be rude, but they may do it out of a family love or asking for a favor later down the line. Your power level may be above them, but not by much. But a content creator asking a fan base to do free art they can use for thumbnails or icons? Now those power scales are astronomical. There is no chance of a returned favor. It's done out of the desire for that reward attention. And the fact is, at the end of the day, the creator knows about this power. They know that their fan base will do whatever they ask. By being aware of that power and choosing to use it for personal benefits regardless, with no intention of exchanging in return for any sort of proper support or payment, now this has shifted into the abuse of their power. All of that to say, pay your damn artists, bro. They work hard on that shit. Anyways, the point is, just because you are aware of your power or the aware of others' power now doesn't mean that every interaction or exchange is manipulative or harmful. Power can be handled safely in various amounts, exchanged with mutual benefits, and used to help and lift up entire groups of people. It's when the power exchange becomes unbalanced. When people gather too much power, use it selfishly to gain or take from others, that it begins to devolve. When titles like officer or president get to your head, give you reason to believe that you know right and wrong above all others, when you gained that consequential power to decide whether people get to live or die, when you get to play judge, jury, and executioner all on your own whims, when people like Dream obtain the powers of gods and use that to shape the world to their liking, that is when the age-old saying shows its ugly truth. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.